My senior thesis topic is about criminal justice, focusing on the death penalty for first-degree murder. I selected my senior thesis topic because as a kid I was interested in becoming a detective, but then I did some research and I realized it was a lot of schooling and decided against it, but I still have a passion and a love for it, so I decided for my senior year I will be focusing on the death penalty.
Splats of blood on the floors, thick and dark, spread across the ground, gathered around the body. Lifeless, quiet, and serene. Almost peaceful in a way that feels wrong. The air is still. A detective stands a few feet away, staring at the scene. His jawline tightens. His eyes move from the body to the blood and back again, trying to piece together the last moments of a life that ended too soon. Under his breath, he murmurs, "Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his image." The words hang in the room, not dramatic, just heavy. First-degree murder isn't something small. It isn't a mistake made in the heat of a moment. It is planned, it is thought out, it's calculated. First-degree murder is the most serious form of homicide because it shows intent and it shows purpose. So what should the consequence be? Should it be equal or greater to the punishment? Does it fit with the severity of the crime? The detective looks around one last time. The victim cannot speak. The blood cannot explain. The law has to do that now. The law has to decide what justice looks like. When someone makes a deliberative choice to end another human being's life. In a room this quiet, with a body this still, one thing is clear. The consequence for a crime should be equal or greater to the offense of the crime. The issue of murder and justice has been discussed for thousands of years and remains an important part of human history. One of the earliest examples comes from the book of Genesis, where Cain killed his brother Abel out of anger and jealousy. This occurs shortly after Adam and Eve bring sin into the world, showing how quickly violence became a problem in human society. From the very beginning, this story introduces the great conversation about what justice should look like and how people should respond to the seriousness of crimes. It raises important questions about punishment and whether justice should focus on fairness, mercy, or both. Building on this foundation, murder is the intentional act of one person killing another. It has existed in every society throughout history, regardless of the time period or culture. And laws have always been created to address it. Across civilizations, people have recognized that taking a life is one of the most serious acts a person can commit. Even in earlier stories like Cain and Abel, there is a clear understanding that murder is wrong and requires some form of response or consequence in order to maintain order in society. Because murder is such a serious and universal issue, it is important to define both murder and justice clearly. Murder can be described as the intentional and unlawful killing of another person. In connection with this, justice refers to determining a fair and appropriate response to that crime. However, deciding what is fair is not always simple. Societies consider several goals when determining punishment. For example, some people view justice as retribution, meaning the punishment should match the severity of the crime, often expressed as an eye for an eye. In addition, others emphasize deterrence. A specific deterrent prevents the individual from committing the crime again, while a general deterrent discourages others in society by showing consequences of such actions. Furthermore, some people believe justice should include rehabilitation, helping the offender change, incapacitation, protecting society by removing the offender's ability to cause harm, and restoration, preparing harm where possible. Even so, these approaches can be more difficult to imply in some cases of murder because the harm cannot be undone. Given these definitions and perspectives, murder is considered one of the most serious crimes because it takes a life, which cannot be replaced or restored. Because it is intentional and often premeditated, it shows a deep disregard for the values of others and for human dignity. As a result, many people believe the punishment should also be severe. In fact, harsh punishments are often seen as a way to reflect the seriousness of the crime and show respect for the life that was lost. At the same time, others question whether severity alone creates true justice, which continues to broaden. With all of this in mind, societies must decide how to punish murder in ways that are both fair and effective. Some argue that punishment should closely match the crime in order to achieve justice, while others believe that the justice system should focus more on preventing future crimes, rehabilitating offenders, or protecting society as a whole. Therefore, laws must balance multiple goals rather than focus on just one approach. Ultimately, the challenge is to create a system that ensures accountability, deters future crimes, and upholds a consistent and meaningful sense of justice for everyone involved. To better understand how our legal systems can achieve this, it is important to examine key principles that support this idea. One of the clearest foundations for proportional justice is lex talionis, is the law of retaliation, commonly expressed as an eye for an eye. With the Protestant ethical system, justice is understood that the punishment must fit the crime. It is for civil authorities to administer fair and equal justice, and it is a guard against both excessive revenge and unjust leniency. It reflects God's moral order and upholds human dignity by ensuring accountability, equity, and the protection of the innocent. If you murder someone and it's proved that you did it, God says you forfeit your right to live because that's how valuable the image of God is. Genesis 9:6, like I said from earlier, states, "Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image." Taking the life of another human being is not something small. Life is a gift from God. Humans are made in God's image. So the punishment for destroying another human being's life must match the weight of the crime. Genesis 9:6 gives us a clear framework for understanding that punishment should match the crime. Things such as murder should be treated seriously, and the death penalty is considerably appropriate response for such a wicked act. Braid and Rosamund have commented on one of the strengths of lex talionis. It sets clear guidelines for punishment. The authors point out that this principle prevents disproportionate sentencing and ensures the law is being applied evenly. Clarity and consistency in our legal systems help avoid confusion. When a system has clear guidelines, it helps prevent disproportionality to the offense of the crime. At the same time, proportional justice is not only about consistency, but also about preventing punishment from going too far. The authors identify that clarity and consistency are a central strength of lex talionis. Legal systems that don't administer fair and unequal punishments enable disproportionate penalties. As the author notes, the principle prevents disproportionate sentencing and ensures the law is evenly applied. When legal systems are grounded in objective standards rather than subjective judgment, civil authorities are better equipped to administer justice adequately and evenly. Lex talionis provides such a standard by insisting that penalties correspond with the principle that punishment should be equal to the offense. In contrast, when our legal systems lack clear standards, it can enable civil authorities to administer fair and unequal punishments. Individuals who commit the same offense may receive different sentences based on subjective judgment rather than objective standards. Lex talionis addresses this issue by giving us a simple and consistent rule: punishment must match the crime. Kesar Jr. reinforces this concern for proportional justice by warning against unjust laws and oppressive decrees, stating, "Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees." By establishing clear guidelines, lex talionis prevents punishments from depending on personal opinions of our civil authorities. Within this framework, lex talionis ensures that the penalties correspond appropriately to the severity of the crime, especially cases for first-degree murder. While lex talionis shows why proportional punishment is necessary, the consequences of ignoring it are just as important. Though many argue retribution justice violates the Eighth Amendment's protection against the cruel and unusual punishments, its original purpose was to actually limit punishment rather than encourage it. The authors explain that the principle of proportional punishment was designed to prevent penalties from becoming excessive, rather than allowing civil authorities to impose punishments that aren't proportional. The Long Commentary on Biblical Law also explains that proportional punishment protects the people from being treated unfairly by civil authorities by tying the punishment to the specific crime. This rule prevents courts from handing out punishments that violate the Eighth Amendment. Retributive justice wasn't about retaliation. It acted as a boundary for our legal systems. Caesar also notes the phrase eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot wasn't applied literally. In many cases, it was carried out through financial repayment or compensation rather than physical injury. This demonstrates that the true purpose of lex talionis was about fairness, not violence. Courts use this principle to guide decisions and make the penalty truly fit the crime. Ultimately, the goal was to prevent penalties from becoming excessive and to ensure justice remains balanced and reasonable. Even in difficult cases, this supports the idea of lex talionis and protects individuals from extreme and unnecessary harm. When a punishment fails to match the seriousness of a crime, it weakens our legal system's ability to deter wrongdoing. When our legal systems impose penalties that are noticeably lighter than the crimes committed, it creates a situation where risks of breaking the law are minimal. This imbalance can encourage individuals to commit crimes, especially those who are already inclined towards criminal behavior. As a result, individuals will be more willing to test boundaries and repeat offenses. Wilson and Harrison expand upon this idea by arguing many offenders don't think in terms of costs and benefits. When penalties are weak and inconsistent, they fail to outweigh the costs of criminal activity. The authors emphasize that human behavior is often driven by impulse, and without strong deterrence, our legal system loses its ability to effectively prevent wrongdoing. Instead of discouraging crime, lenient penalties can unintentionally invite exploitation to our legal systems. The authors argue that disproportionate penalties do more than fail to deter crime. They're actually encouraging it. When offenders repeatedly escape meaningful consequences, they grow more confident in their criminal behavior. The core issue is our legal system's failure to deliver proportional sentences. It creates moral hazard where crime becomes less risky and crime more appealing. This problem is just not theoretical. It has real effects on crime rates till this day. Crime prevention often relies on one simple principle. Societies that align punishments with the severity of the crime tend to maintain stronger control over criminal behavior. When individuals clearly understand that they are both real and severe, they are far less likely to break the law. This encourages people to choose lawful behavior and contributing to lower crime rates. In 1975, Isaac Ehrlich published a seminal paper in American Economic Review using econometric analysis on the deterrent effect of the death penalty. Ehrlich argued that his results indicated that executions deter murders. While scholars disagree on the methods used to measure this effect, there is far less disagreement about the general principle. Ehrlich's work reinforces the importance of deterrence in explaining why some societies experience a lower crime rate than others. These perspectives suggest that the strong and consistent help prevent crime by raising the perceived costs of offending. While our judicial systems clearly communicate that serious crimes will result in serious consequences, potential offenders will reflect on the consequences and choose not to go ahead. The goal of punishment for murder is not cruelty, but maintaining social order in safe communities. However, when punishments become inconsistent or too lenient, the deterrent effect begins to break down. When punishments fail to match the seriousness of a crime, Offenders don't fully understand the harm they have caused. This weakens the authority and the effectiveness of the judicial system. For example, if someone commits first-degree murder and it receives a lenient sentence, it can send a message that the crime is not treated with appropriate seriousness. As a result, offenders may feel less pressure to change their behavior. A criminologist, Daniel S. Nagin, emphasizes in his work on the deterrence that punishment must be both certain and meaningful to be effective. His research shows that even violent crimes can be influenced by whether offenders believe the consequences would significantly impact their lives. The concept of punishment, not just its existence, plays a crucial role in deterrence. Ultimately, our legal systems does not impose fair and proportionate punishment. It risks allowing dangerous individuals to keep on offending. Weak or mismatched penalties fail to discourage long-term criminal behavior. In the end, disproportionate punishment undermines deterrence and allows crime to keep happening again. Beyond deterrence, proportional punishment also plays a broader role in maintaining social stability. In addition to discouraging crime, proportional punishment helps preserve fairness within society. Proportionate penalties play a crucial role in promoting fairness and justice within our legal systems. When the penalties align with the severity of the offense, they reinforce the principle that justice is fair, rather than capricious or inconsistent. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, punishment must be proportional to wrongdoing, ensuring that individuals are neither excessively punished nor treated too leniently. This balance helps keep societies in order. Fair punishments matter because they help keep the justice system fair and steady. When the punishment matches how serious the crime is, people feel like things aren't being handled the right way, not just at random. Experts agree that punishment should fit the crime, so no one is treated too harshly or too lightly. This helps keep things running smoothly. This perceived fairness encourages compliance within the law. Individuals are more willing to follow rules when they believe they'll be treated justly if they break them. In this way, proportionate punishment helps the system run smoothly by promoting cooperation, reducing resistance, and strengthening trust in our legal systems. When punishments are fair, people are less likely to see the system as unfair. Unfair punishments can lead to serious problems, such as public frustration, loss of trust in government, and even resistance and defiance of the law. In some cases, people may be less willing to comply with the rules, or may actively challenge civil authorities if they believe the system is biased. This sense of fairness is closely tied to another key function of proportional punishment, limiting the power of authorities. Fair punishment is important because it limits how much power authorities can exercise over particular individuals and groups. When there are clear limits on how harsh a punishment can be, it prevents courts and judges from going too far. Experts say punishment should match how serious the crime is so it stays fair and makes sense. Proportionality ensures that the punishment remains tied to the offense rather than the opinions or preferences of those in power. When a justice system follows this idea, it is less likely to become unjust. Without limits, people in charge might punish others based on their own opinions or unfair reasons. But when punishments are clearly established, it makes sure everyone is treated under the same law. Fair punishment also makes sure the government uses its power the right way. Studies show that when punishments are not balanced, some groups of people can be treated worse than others. Keeping punishments within those clear limits helps reduce this problem and keeps things more equal. It also shapes how offenders understand and respond to their actions. Matching the punishment to the crime also helps offenders better understand the consequences of their actions. When the punishment fits the offense, it creates a clear and logical conclusion. It shows a clear link between action and result. Research shows that people are more likely to learn from punishment when it feels serious but still fair. If the punishment is too lenient, offenders might not take it seriously and fail to recognize the harm caused. If it is too harsh, they might focus more on the perceived rather than reflecting on their actions. However, when it feels proportionate, individuals are more likely to accept responsibility and learn from their actions. Fair punishment does more than just stop crime. It helps educate both offenders and a society as a whole. It communicates that the legal system enforces clear, predictable consequences for wrongdoing. This understanding encourages better decision-making, not only by those who have committed offenses, but also others who observe how the system operates. In this way, proportionate punishment promotes accountability, reinforces social norms, and supports long-term law-abiding behavior. Even with these strengths, critics still challenge whether proportional punishment is truly just or effective. One major criticism is that the death penalty simply mirrors the crime it seeks to punish. Some people say that killing someone who has committed murder is doing the same bad thing back to them. I understand why people feel this way. Taking a life is always serious, and it can seem like the system is repeating the same kind of violence it's trying to punish. However, I think there is a key difference. A murderer chooses to violate the law and take the life of another. While the death penalty is within the law, it is designed to protect people and keep order. It is not about getting revenge, but making sure people are held responsible for their actions. For instance, laws are created to protect society and show that some actions are completely unacceptable. When someone commits first-degree murder, the punishment is meant to match how serious that crime is. This shows that human life is important and should be respected. Another concern is that harsher punishments do not always prevent crime. Some people believe that harsher punishments do not always stop crime. I agree with this, because not everyone thinks about the consequences before they act. Sometimes crimes happen quickly without planning or thinking, and sometimes people go ahead and commit the crime even though they know it's wrong and will be punished. Even so, harsher punishments can still have an effect. They may not stop every crime, but they can make some people think twice before doing something serious. They also show that society takes these crimes very seriously. For example, people who plan crimes ahead of time are more likely to think about the punishment they could face. This means harsher penalties can sometimes prevent those kinds of crimes. While it's not perfect, it still helps reduce crime in some cases. Finally, some argue that proportional justice alone can't guarantee fairness or order. Some people argue that matching the punishment to the crime does not always lead to that. I agree that fairness can be hard to achieve because every situation is different. People have different backgrounds and experiences and have different reasons behind their actions. However, proportional punishment is still important for a fair system. Some crimes, like first-degree murder, are so serious there is no reasonable excuse to justify leniency. Less serious crimes like shoplifting should result in less serious punishment. Setting serious and substantial punishment from all serious offenses helps make sure that punishments are not too harsh. Without proportional punishment, the system could feel unfair. Say, if small crimes and serious crimes have the same punishment, people would see that as unfair. A system with balanced punishments helps people trust the law more. This trust is important for keeping order in society. Now imagine with me for a second. The courtroom is silent. The tension is thick. The defendant stands shackled, his eyes cold and unmoving as the judge calls for the final verdict. The room feels smaller now, as if the walls themselves are closing in on the weight of the decision that will be made. The prosecutor rises. The courtroom hangs on his every word. This man took a life, and in doing so, he chose to end someone's future. He chose to destroy the potential for love, for family, and for happiness. He took it all in a moment of cold calculation. Now it is time for us to decide what justice looks like. What does it mean to protect the innocent from those who could harm them? This man killed a brother. A mother and a father has to go on living with the death of their son. Friends are left picking up the pieces without them, trying to make sense of the horror that has happened. Someone with a future, with dreams, with a life that was just beginning, gone in an instant. The defense attorney looks away. There is no denying the hardness in his eyes. He knows this moment is inevitable. Though he fights for one chance at leniency, at mercy, this man is a product of his own circumstances, he argues. Though the words seem hollow in a room filled with the memory of a life that was ripped away. The judge pauses, his gaze flickering to the victim. the family of the victim. Their faces are worn with grief, the weight of their loss etched in every wrinkle and every tear. The decision is not one to be taken lightly, but the law is clear and the evidence undeniable. A final moment of silence stretches. Then the judge speaks, his voice calm but resolute. The consequence for a crime this severe should reflect the offense. Justice served must be equal to the crime. And so, with the great deliberation of the court has decided. The room falls into hushed stillness, the gravity of the decision sinking in. The defendant doesn't flinch, but the family of the victim finally breathes a collective sigh of relief. The gavel comes down with a resounding thud. The law has spoken. Justice has been served. As the officer leads the defendant away, the detective from earlier who had watched the trial quietly in the back looks back at the victim's family. He knows that this decision, as hard as it was necessary to prevent future violence. The law can't bring the victim back, but it can keep others safe. And in the end, this is what justice is all about.